welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner, and today I'm privileged to have as my guest, Joe Abercrombie. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good, Yeah, it's lovely to be here talking to another human after a long time in my own room with my own company.
I know exactly how you feel, mate, and delivering the other human experience is what we're endeavouring to do here at Forbidden Planet. As we ease out of, or do ease out of, the lockdown, we shall see.
Let's hope.
We'll roll those dice and see how it goes, I guess. Throw those masks off, just throw caution to the wind.
Caution to the wind, absolutely. What could go wrong?
Yeah, no, absolutely nothing, right? I mean, come on. Yeah, I mean, clearly we're dealing with a lot of tremendous scientific leadership here, so everything's been very carefully thought through, planned, detailed.
Absolutely, it's like a fine Swiss watch. Every part works.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfectly in its own
just like
place.
An episode of Bosch, mate.
Exactly so. Yeah.
So Joe, what can you tell me about your latest novel, which everyone can order from the links attached to this conversation, The Wisdom of Crowds?
Which is, of course, the key thing, the ordering. The rest is all flim-flam.
Read
it, don't read it. I'm not too bothered about that. As long as you order it.
Joe's right here in his library talking to us. Order the book now.
Well, it's the third installment in a trilogy, which is set in a kind of long-standing world I've worked in for a long time. The trilogy is called The Age of Madness, and it really takes an established fantasy world with some of those classic features of sort of wizards and warriors and boys with special destinies and all those things we love, and pushes the world forward into a more industrial era. So it's how that kind of world tackles an industrial revolution, really. And it focuses, as all my stuff does, mostly on the characters. It's a character-based thing, and it's the stories of these mismatched, slightly unpleasant, conflicted and morally ambiguous people as they feud and struggle for supremacy over one another. That's generally, and the fireworks, the violence, the sex, the excitement, the arguments, and the mishaps that happen along the way.
All that great stuff.
Exactly so.
So this trilogy, so Age of Madness started off with a little hatred, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and then worked through to the trouble with peace, and now it's The Wisdom of Crowds.
Exactly.
So by the way, I think your books have. I say this to authors every now and again when it's true, and it's true for you.
Only then.
Only then. I wouldn't say if it wasn't. Your books have such excellent titles, mate.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that I always, worked at. I mean, I think the fantasy I read as a kid, I read a lot of fantasy in the 80s and 90s, Dragonlance, things of that nature. And, you get quite a lot of straight ahead titles. Dungeon of the Dwarf Hammer is one that I'd like to write at some point. It's that kind of thing. It's very literal. And I've always liked a title that has a mystery to it, that asks a question, that sets up a mood for a book, but doesn't give you anything too obvious. And so as you read it, you're kind of constantly thinking, how does this refer to the content? And they're usually based around a quote that I've drawn from somewhere that makes me look cleverer than I am, which is what this entire exercise is really all about.
Right? Oh, well, of course, mate. I mean, that's why Wikipedia's there, and that's why the internet exists. You've just described my Instagram feed perfectly. It's not readily understandable images with a quote that I've spent 5 minutes, researching on the internet.
Well, that's good enough.
Yeah. No greater conduit to intelligence than doing that, mate. Absolutely. But in reality, of course, your titles are tremendously thought through, and I think it's. What's great about it is when you read your work, you have that moment when the relevance of the title becomes apparent. And I always love that. When you've got a title, think, oh, that sounds good. I wonder what it's actually kicking inside the novel. And then you get to that point, it's like, oh yeah, I like it. I thought your First Law trilogy, all three of those books have such amazing titles, but my particular favorite is Before They're Hanged.
Yeah.
That's I loved that the moment I saw it on the shelf. Oh yeah, okay. You're talking my language in the title.
It gives a tone for it, but also the quote it comes from, which is, "We should forgive our enemies, but not before they are hanged." Is a nice sort of indication of the general feel and the way that a lot of the characters.
A lovely sardonic feel to it.
Yeah, and they're not the sort of pure heroes that I read a lot about as a kid, and perhaps got a little bit impatient with. I like people who are going to surprise you and perhaps take you down a dark path you weren't looking for.
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. And could you give us a spoiler-free flavour of where we are going into book 3 of the Age of Madness? What has happened thus far, and what we can expect from the Wisdom of Crowds?
Yeah, I mean, so the first book, you know, as I was saying, they're generally mostly concerned on the characters and their lives, and so it sort of picks up these characters, one of whom is, for instance, a kind of socialite investor of a totally new type who is kind of using her money and her influence and her sort of social connections to build a great power base for herself. Another is a sort of typical hero who wants to become a shining knight in armor, really, and finds that his expectations hit reality quite hard. So it's these kind of people of that kind. It sets up the people and the world as it's moving into this new industrial era. Then the second book, The Trouble with Peace, starts to pit some of these characters against each other. You know, alliances shift, politics gets involved, people are manipulated by powers behind the scenes, and that leads to a civil war, the result of which I won't kind of give too much away about. Yeah. But simmering in the background is this sort of revolutionary fervor, really, as well. There are these groups called the Breakers and the Burners who are kind of workers' uprising, I suppose you might say. Yeah. And so the third book is when that really comes to the fore and society is turned upside down. I was thinking of, you know, the French Revolution particularly, but also the Russian Revolution and other similar events. And so it's a kind of a political revolution within that world, and how these characters, you know, will they sink or swim when the world is completely turned upside down? And the Wisdom of Crowds obviously is meant slightly ironically. You know, it's not about the current political moment, but at the same time, as a writer, you're always influenced by what's going on around you. You know, and so Brexit and the political upheaval in the States and the general feel of the world being changed and different and unpredictable that we've had over the last few years has really fed into the tone of this book, I think.
Yeah, I get it, mate. What I would describe as the dismaying catastrophe fuck that we are living in at the moment, right? And well, I mean, things could be worse. I mean, you know, all this could be going on while there's a raging infectious disease killing thousands of people across the world, and we could have fucked up the climate as well. So
only imagine if that. Thank God.
Yeah, thank God we're not in that situation.
True.
Yeah, no, I kind of really want to kind of exit the matrix at this point, I think, and just get back into the pod. You know,
now's the time to escape into a fantastic book.
Yeah,
that'd be my advice. In which we see a more optimistic version of the world through the lens of cynical fantasy fiction. Yeah.
Absolutely, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think, and that's why people should be ordering not just the Wisdom of Crowds, but the whole trilogy, the whole Age of Madness trilogy, right from Forbidden Planet, right here, right now. Get it done.
I absolutely couldn't agree with you more. I mean, in my books, you know, the strings are partly pulled by sinister, immortal wizards behind the scenes. And I found myself wishing recently for a sinister, immortal wizard to appear to just show us the way and tell us what to do and clear that stuff up. Just competence. Yeah. That's all I want. I don't care about the motives.
I mean, it's a big ask in today's political society, mate. But of course, I find myself praying for exactly those things, or indeed a conspiracy. You know, the fact that a conspiracy, somebody might actually be smart enough to put a conspiracy together. I would
it's
find
a kind of comfort, isn't it? Absolutely. To think the world might run on some kind of rules, even if they're horrible ones. Not that it's just a total mess the whole time.
Absolutely right. Now, speaking of these very depressing macro issues, to place that lens on your work, when you're creating the worlds, the novels that you create, what comes first for you? Is it the world, or is it the characters?
I mean, it depends a bit on the book. You know, the approach is a bit different with each series, and obviously, with these three books, they're working in a long-established world. So, you know, a lot of the political backdrop and the history is kind of there and set up already. So there's not the same work to do in developing the world that there might be with a brand new book, a brand new world. But for me, characters are always uppermost anyway. You know, I see the world as kind of the sets. I think people are often, you know, fantasy, the thing it has that's different from other kinds of fiction is that invented world, that setting, the magic, the rules, the monsters. So people often you know, get distracted by that, perhaps to the detriment of the characters and the plot and the things fantasy has in common with everything else. And that's really what I'm more interested in. The people, first of all. To me, you know, the most cliched, repetitive plot can be fascinating again with a fascinating narrator whose voice is new and exciting. You know, that's the thing I really respond to from other writers. And so that's where I tend to put my effort is developing the characters and developing the voice and revising and going over the book a lot to kind of refine those voices and get them as distinct as I possibly can.
Now, it doesn't surprise me at all that you said that, mate, because I think that is very apparent in your work. And you and I were talking off camera about Boss, which is, you know, another example of that, something that's meticulously crafted and really well thought through, even though in and of itself it's not opening the door and chucking a hand grenade. And I think that's, even though I think the world building in your work is great and it's fascinating, it's the people that kick, you know, and I think that's why everybody should be not just checking this trilogy out, but First Law as well. You know, I think you've built up an excellent body of work in a relatively short space of time, mate.
It feels like a long time to me.
Of course it does.
Yeah. So I think I started writing the first one in 2001. Seriously, so it's 20 years now, which is horrifying.
Right? That's amazing.
I know, and obviously still a fresh new voice.
Yeah, well, indeed.
Clearly, but 20 years, I've been a fresh new voice now. And I was horrified to find out that, you know, Game of Thrones, which I think of as this milestone, a kind of historical milestone that had a big influence on me. But, you know, Game of Thrones is much less than twice as old as the Blade itself. You know, the Blade itself has been around a long time now. And it's kind of, I don't know if it's horrifying or gratifying to find your sort of part of the furniture. You know, when you go from saying, you know, Joe Abercrombie is like George R.R. Martin to seeing other people saying this book is kind of like Joe Abercrombie, you think, oh, what? Eh? You know, I'm a fresh new voice. You can't be comparing things to me. So, you do find that obviously your attitude and your approach to writing changes as you get older and you're longer in the business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Horrifying maybe is the way to think of it. And you know, jam those two things up gloriously.
I think it's not a bad way to describe my body of work altogether.
I think it's pretty appropriate. And by the way, for everybody watching this, Joe's got a very entertaining Twitter feed. If you check him out at Lord Grimdark, which is great. It's a great Twitter name.
Meant entirely without irony.
Yeah.
Right. I did that as an obvious joke, and then over time it seems that people have started taking it seriously, as though I am proclaiming myself the lord of a subgenre, which was not really ever my intention to do that.
Yeah, well, sadly, as we both know, social media can often be a humour and irony and sardonic humour-free zone. You know, so sometimes and you don't want to spoil it by, you know, overtly stating, hang on, lads, you know, this is a gag, right? You do get it, right? I mean,
but even if you say that in sand, you know, they might, someone might hear it for 10 minutes, but then it's gone and you get the same comments again. It's fertile ground for misunderstanding, social media, I think it's fair to say.
I completely agree. So on that note, come and get your genre understanding from Forbidden Planet TV and listen to what I have to say, which is I've been delighted to be joined by the supremely talented Joe Abercrombie, where we're talking about his latest novel, The Wisdom of Crowds, which you can pre-order from the links attached to this conversation. Thanks for joining me today, brother.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And hopefully again sometime. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Come back again. And when we finally got signings going on at the store again, you got to come back and see us.
Oh, yeah. Well, that'll be
at Forbidden Planet London.
That'll be wonderful. Yeah. To have things opened up and actually look into the happy faces of some readers once again.
Absolutely right. It'll definitely happen, mate. You take care of yourself, Joe.
You too. Good to speak to you.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.